The Panthera Prime basically just has more crit, status, and seems to do the same amount of damage as the normal one, but does have a radial attack that I'm really interested on seeing in action, because the normal one doesn't have a radial attack. Once you find it in amongst all of this list, there are 4 parts. There is the blueprint, the barrel, the receiver, and the stock. To find the relics, you just go to the codex, go to relics, and you can literally just search the word Panthera and it'll bring them up and show you which relics have what part and obviously where which relic drops if you go and click on it. Simple way to compare them is to just equip it. You can see the fire rate's a little bit better, magazine's bigger, as I say, crit chance status is a little bit bigger, but everything else seems to be about the same. It comes with a V and a dash. One thing I wish Prime Weapons did these days was came with the elixir slot open. I did this all with heavy caliber in here, but I'm probably going to swap that out for split chamber and more than likely form another V on this eventually so I can fit Stormbringer in as a maxed mod. Maybe form a dash into it for it. No, V. Because Firestorm works well on this, and even though the build I have is built around that Riven, because that Riven is plus 180.8% crit chance, plus 118.4% heat, and minus 30.5% zoom, it still made this thing, I'm not going to say insanely powerful, because it's far from it. On most normal, I'm just going to say hard-ish missions for the normal star chart, it worked wonders. But taking it on the steel path, you have to set up the elemental combo, kind of like you do with every weapon. Otherwise, you are just going to suffer through what I can only put as backing off from the enemies because it's just not dealing enough damage. Especially with the Corpus, if you don't put magnetic on, they are going to annihilate you. But that goes for most weapons, not just this. The fact that this was the first weapon to come out after the Steel Path, really expected something that would have increased survivability during the Steel Path. This, nowhere near that. Once it gets to like level 100, it starts to suffer massively. But once you take it on the Steel Path, where the health is 250%, the shield is 250%, and the armor is 250%, oh, things go really weird and weirdly sideways, all at the same time. But the rest of the time, off the Steel Path, this thing was not as big a letdown as I heard it was the day after it was released. I had a few people turning around and saying, I'm having to put half a magazine into somebody, someone said. Some other people were, it's mastery fodder, it's completely useless, it's rubbish. Especially for a mastery rank 14 weapon. But honestly, I think it just comes down to the fact that for once, I actually had a pretty decent, let's just say okay, Riven upon the release of a good Prime. And this thing actually turned out to be pretty good. As expected, that radial attack, if you put the Firestorm mod into it, which improves the blast radius of weapons with radial attacks by 24%, it actually increases the blast radius from 1.6 to 1.98. And even though I did take that off in favour of trying to add more elemental damage to it, when I went on the Steel Path with it, I think I'll throw that back on instead of Firestorm, which is why I don't think I'm going to be forming a dash, probably put a V on it, so I can kind of swap things around, because this thing honestly wasn't as bad as everybody kept telling me that it was. It turned out to be pretty impressive once you take off heavy caliber. That heavy caliber messing up the accuracy, you can shoot directly at an enemy and miss 90% of the time. It got really bad, as a lot of the footage is showing. I'm staring at an enemy and hitting everything but them, because that's the downside to heavy caliber. At range, it ruins everything. It works, but Firestorm is probably going to be better, especially for things like crowd control. but it didn't turn out to be that bad of a weapon. I've put 4 formula, I'm looking at a 5th, maybe. I think I'll leave this thing on for a while, more so now that I don't have to deal with lenses, because maxed out the focus tree, so don't have to find a lens to put on it. And swapping out that heavy caliber for split chamber means the accuracy is back up to 80 where it should be and can actually hit things. Once you actually can hit things, as long as you remember, if you're taking it on the steel path, match the element, or the status chance to it, well really it was right the first time, the element, to the enemy you're going up against, and this thing works wonders. I kind of ran this thing most of the time with radiation on it because that ribbon had heat, and it just meant I had to put something in like high voltage, and it increased the status chance to, well, 66% when split chamber was put in, but it still increased it and added radiation, which seems to work against most enemies, to be honest, apart from the corpus. That magnetic, definitely needed if you're going up the steel path with this thing. Yes, I would agree with a few people. Mastery rank 14 is a little bit high for this. Maybe rank 12 would have been better, mastery rank 12. Because if it was a mastery rank 12, it would have been a much better weapon. The fact that it's a mastery rank 14 does kind of limit this thing just a little bit. But it is definitely worth getting hold of because that radial attack when the blades it shoots kind of explodes is great. The whole secondary fire mode on the other hand, yeah, the crit chance on that is 130.8 with that ribbon in there. It deals about the same amount of damage, but it just increases the crit that it does. It's good, but honestly, I just preferred the primary attack mode to this. The secondary was... it didn't seem to do as much damage. I think it's just the fact that the radial attack from the primary attack mode on this was so good, which is what the saving factor of this is. The secondary was... I can't explain it. It just didn't seem as good, even though it has more crit chance and it has more status. It does have a much more limited range, and it doesn't have the radial attack that the primary has, which was weird. But at the same time, you basically just shoot the blade off the end and it leaves a beam. But unless you hit them with the blade spinning off the end, it doesn't really do any damage anyway. So I think we'll leave this off here for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.